FANMADE Film Podcast.
Hello, konnichiwa, guten tag, bonjour, and yo, it's Rachel here, and welcome to this very special bonus episode of the FANMADE Film Podcast. The first season of FANMADE has been a truly unique and special experience for me. I learned a lot about podcasting, but most importantly, a lot about filmmaking. My intention was always to understand the ideas and motivations behind professionally made fan films, and I think this first season has been a really great insight into that, but it's generally been a really powerful way for me to learn about the intricacies of filmmaking across different disciplines and departments. And it's been a real honour to talk to all of the season one filmmakers and now be able to share those conversations with listeners. So I really hope that any of you who are filmmakers that have listened to these episodes, I hope that you feel fired up about your projects. I hope what you've learned and heard on the episodes is, really fired you up for those projects, whether they're fan films or not. And I hope there's been some key takeaways that you can take into your upcoming projects. And I also hope that those upcoming projects or current projects are starting to get the go-ahead now, now that kind of lockdown and coronavirus stuff is kind of lifting. So this bonus episode was actually very unexpected. A few weeks ago in May, I think, Susan Goforth, who's a Hollywood producer and actor, got in touch about her production company's new Amazon Prime series. Her production company is Pendragon Productions, based in Los Angeles. She wanted to invite me to speak to two of the people involved in the new Amazon Prime series, Chrome. She offered me the chance to speak to the director and lead actor. And I'm never one to turn a chance to speak to Hollywood filmmakers down. So I said I would, of course, be honoured. So this episode is a conversation with director Timothy Hines, whose previous work includes some really powerful stories about women made alongside female crew, which is a rarity in Hollywood, especially in certain positions, so like sound or sound editing, anything that's maybe more on the technical side of things. So talking to Tim, and the actor is Natasha Coppola Shalom. So yes, that Coppola family. Honestly, I was pretty blown away by being given the opportunity to talk to someone from such an iconic film dynasty. Natasha is the Francis Ford Coppola's grandniece and the Nicolas Cage's niece. It's honestly a funny old world right now, and I really thank the filmmaking gods for this conversation and all of the conversations of season one. It's gotten me through a challenging and worrying couple of months and truly given me the fire in my belly to dedicate myself to what is really my very first love and pick up the camera, open up Final Draft, sit for hours in front of Premiere and actually make my films. So I really hope you enjoy this bonus episode with Natasha Coppola Shalom and Timothy Hines and feel their passion for increasing opportunities and diversity in Hollywood. And I hope you go on to check out their new series, Chrome, on Amazon Prime as well. It's really, really great fun. And if you're into sci-fi, you will love it. So enjoy this conversation and I will see you at the end. Thank you very much for joining me on the FANMADE podcast, Timothy Hines and Natasha Coppola Shalom. It's great to speak to both of you. I don't want to dwell on the coronavirus stuff too much because I'm sure we've all had quite enough of it. But how are both of you? Are you okay? How have the last couple of months been for you?
I'm okay. I mean, I had it in January though, but quarantine is I actually don't mind it. I like quarantine quite a lot. I'm with my dog and he's been great company. So,
lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And Timothy, have you been okay?
In early March, my family came down with coronavirus.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And we had the bad kind, the not super, you to get it in one weekend and then die that weekend kind, but the next step down, whatever that part of the luck of the draw is. And where I would say, let me just kind of say, over an 8-week period, having daily doctor calls of more than one doctor, points when the EMC, that's the emergency workers, arguing with the doctors about whether or not we should go into the hospital, where they had basically beds set up in tents outside the hospitals.
Wow.
And the emergency workers saying, like, no, you can stand up. The fact that you can even talk to me, we don't want to take you to that place.
Wow.
And my doctor's going, you have to go in and get more x-rays just in case there's certain lung things happening and things happening that we don't know about, and we can't just prescribe antibiotics over the phone. But the long and the short of it is we survived it. It's not like having the flu. It's like having the flu and then getting hit with the flu again, and then every couple of colds that you could ever have imagined all at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's all I will say about it. It's just that I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
And it was a long, slow, arduous crawl back, within reality for myself and my loved ones around me. And oddly, my sister, who was one of the first diagnosed coronavirus patients in the United States, died of coronavirus actually in March. And so that's my story. It's a lot, but so I don't really, politics one way or another. Humanity behaves a certain way during pandemics. We can look to the past to see how we will behave. And my Svengali, that's not the right word. What's the Cassandra effect that I've sort of had with my friends, of telling everybody the things that are going to come, and everybody kind of laughing at me at first, and then people realizing that I kind of knew what I was talking about. But because it's not about the politics, because the politicians will jump on and capitalize on these events and try and turn it to their advantage. I mean, there's a lot that went down during the first pandemic of the Black Plague in Europe, and how power restructured itself based on people's fears.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, I'm here. I'm happy to be here. And
Great.
as I said, way too much already, but so.
No,
TYI.
it's obviously like it's quite a kind of crazy time, really, and it's hard to not talk about it. And I'm really glad you're both here and you're both well, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to you both, specifically about your new series Chrome, for this very special episode. I actually I've got two hats on today. The first hat is the FANMADE film podcast, so talking to you guys about Chrome from that perspective, but here in Brighton in the south of the UK, on near the beach, I run a little community called Digital Women, and we kind of seek to support and raise up women working in more male-dominated, male-led industries. So that lends itself very well to talking about film, obviously, and a lot has obviously changed over the years, but that's those two hats that I'm kind of talking to you about, hopefully, and I've got a few questions about those kind of things as well. So I actually normally begin my FANMADE chats by asking my guests how they got into filmmaking, but Natasha, I might have to slightly rephrase that question for you, because obviously you come from a huge filmmaking family dynasty that is extremely well known, so I'm kind of guessing that's how you got into filmmaking, perhaps.
Actually not at all.
Oh, yay, excellent.
So there's an interesting story there. So I wanted to, well, first of all, I'll say my parents wanted me to get to know my family as family. So I did not know that my family were in the industry at all until I was in high school. So I was totally sheltered. I didn't see any of their films. I had no idea that anyone was in the industry at all until I was like 14 years old. And one of my other cousins said to me, I know the secret, and told, but I wanted to act when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
We did a production of Stone Soup in preschool, and I was just crying because I couldn't do it all the time. And then the same thing happened when I was 5 years old, and we did Madeline. All I wanted to do was actually act. So it was just like, for me, it was such an early age where I just felt like this is everything I want in the world. And my family had absolutely nothing to do with it. I didn't find out that my family was in the industry until until I already knew it was my whole heart. So
yeah, that's so great that it's so organic, that it just
yeah,
came in, because there's always that kind of classic story of people getting into the family business and feeling maybe obligated to get into it because of
right.
that. But obviously this has come massively organically to you, and that must be like a real like a comfort to know that this is yours, completely separate from any kind of destiny or anything
And
like that.
similarly, all the work I've done completely by my own accord. So, it's more than that. It's also knowing, like, now that I'm starting to have more success, that I've earned it and that I deserve to be here.
Yeah,
So, yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of just, it's nice. Like, it's the thing I love most, but it's also a thing that is completely my own.
yeah, yeah. Have you had any kind of since getting into your career and doing more and more work, have you had become familiar with other family members' work and drawn any kind of inspiration, or have any family members kind of given you any kind of guidance or insight that's really helped you?
Yeah. So my Aunt Talia Shire, she's really great. She'll sit down with me and watch my films frame by frame.
Oh,
And she'll just break it down frame by frame and say, okay, this is what I see in this frame. This is what I see in this frame. So she's just been really artistically inspirational, because she's such an actor. She's she's not like a movie star. She's such an actor.
yeah,
She's so excited about doing practical work. She just does monologues on her own in her home. And so really getting to chat with her is, I mean, unbelievable. So she's been a real inspiration. And like sometimes I recently watched Moonstruck, and I'd never seen it before. But every time I see one of my family's films for the first time, because there's still so many that I haven't seen because I didn't know for so long. But I just thought my uncle was just so incredible in that. And I think just the way, I mean, he is such a unique person, right? But watching his work and the naturalism in which he has these bizarre characters come to life, I just think he's brilliant. So
yeah,
yeah, I'm inspired just by his work.
yeah, that's great. And Timothy, having become a bit more familiar with some of your previous work over the last couple of weeks and thinking about this interview, I know that the portrayal of women in film is a kind of a key theme for you. And over the last few years, Hollywood's obviously undergone a kind of huge, I guess, uptick in the kind of scrutiny and accountability around the treatment and portrayal of women. And now, I guess, obviously recently and thankfully, the same scrutiny has been brought into focus for people of color, and diversity has never been so kind of hugely present in the minds of people working in the industry, but also the audience, the people who are watching those films, and kind of critically as well. Natasha, as a woman kind of working in Hollywood and the film industry, have you seen any kind of change happening? I mean, both of you, have you seen any kind of change happening? And have your experiences of a woman working on Hollywood changed in any way since this kind of shift?
A little bit. A little bit. There has been a shift to more inclusion and more diversity. So we'll definitely see that. And over the past like 2 or 3 or 4 years, that's really been happening. Not enough, not quickly enough, but inclusion of women, I mean, a little bit, but I mean, how many successful female directors are there, and how many, I mean, the small parts, right? It's not just the leading roles and things, but you'll watch a film and the mailman and the bartender and the wait, they're all men. So, faster, please. But I will say one of my favorite things about working with Timothy is he is such a feminist director. And I don't know if you saw the movie 10 Days in a Madhouse. I mean, Tim makes films about women. And his casts are either primarily or the majority women, and his crews are very female, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of females in the crew too.
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite things about working with Tim, because you don't need a female director to have a feminist set or to have an inclusive set. And Tim is just someone who believes in equality and exemplifies that in his work. And this is one of my favorite things about working with Tim. And his stories are all about strong women.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So,
so more of that, please. Yeah, definitely.
For me, I started out back, I would say, professionally in the late 1970s in film. And, when we were still physically actually splicing film and rolling it around and diving into bins to find bits and pieces of footage to cut together.
Yeah.
And I had, in my very early days, a very strange, interesting experience. I worked at a little place called the Millennium Film Co-op, where you would trade time on an editing machine, a flatbed editor, to be a clerk there when people would come in and want to use their equipment, and they would rent it for $5 an hour, whatever, it was something like that. And I met this woman who was cutting together her little film, and she was a woman who had worked in a brothel and saved up all of her money from working in a brothel and did a dark comedy about a woman working in a brothel, saving up all of her money to make a movie about it. If that's not strange enough. So it was called Working Girls. And there were these two very bearish, and by that I mean physically large men that were coming in out of sort of other nefarious industries that were, how would I say this? They were looking around for some kind of an art film that had some sex in it. And this sort of fit that bill. So here was sort of this ultimate feminist woman's story of the sex industry. And it was really provocative, where she goes into the pharmacy and says, I need, some Trojan condoms. And the guy puts down the pack and he goes, will that be all? And she goes, no, I need some Naloxone, 7, blah, 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 whatever. I need 3 elastic cups. And then she goes on, and it's like this prophylactic, sex protection thing that grows into this giant pile in front of her. And she's a sex industry worker, and she has to protect herself 10,000 ways. And it's very funny in just that it's unspoken. And he goes, and is that it? And she goes, no. And then she pulls out a second list. And it's basically the same list again, like that big. But so the guys who bought her film were these guys, Harvey and Bob Weinstein, whom I helped them put that film together. So in a weird kind of indirect way, I was sort of responsible in a very microcosmic ant, lifted my tiny little grain of sand, helped to make Miramax into a company, because they were a company that had their offices over the top of a mailbox, etc. And so I've seen a lot of change in how women have had access to film, and how women were oftentimes used by Hollywood as we don't have enough women in Hollywood, quick, throw a bunch of women out there. And to me, I was, I'm raised in a giant family where I have 5 sisters. They're older than me. And my mother was, she had 10 kids, and she was raised in a dirt shack floor in Kentucky, a dirt floor shack in Kentucky. And my father was the other way. He went to, fine schools on the East Coast and blah, blah, blah. And it was a weird love story that's a movie all in and of itself. But the point that I'm making is that for my world, just being a human, I always saw where the females in my life and the females in the world around me had glass doors, in the same way that Afro-Americans are now totally saying, like, no more of this stuff where we're set back. And everybody sees it. So everybody needs to own up to it in some way or another, wake up to it and just get on with it and start dealing with it now. And then those that won't will be basically, I think, a juggernaut's just going to roll over the top of them, of people who are just sick and tired of, the world doesn't need to be that way. It's not making it any better for me as a white person. That little extra white advantage I can do without. And have it be more like, let's just be as more even playing field as we can. Now, it's not the end all be all where we are right now. That's not how the world works. But it's a 2 steps forward before people that are on the opposition crystallize themselves and then push themselves in to shut it down or to confuse it. More than likely is the thing that happens today anymore. Warfare of today is confusion. And sorry.
Well, I was just thinking, what ways do you both see that kind of men in Hollywood can support women and people of color better in the industry? Are there specific areas that you think we can do much better in this specific area?
I mean, hire us. And also, I think it's important we get more female writers, right? Because so many scripts are written from the male perspective. And a lot of people do get it right. Like I think Tim's writing is very true to, is great, excellent. But a lot of men don't write women as women. And we don't get the female perspective a lot. Like, I think one of the things that was so great about Wonder Woman is you had a female director telling this story, right? So I think hire us. We need more female actors. We need more female writers, producers, everything, it just the whole team needs to have more female. I feel like when you walk into a set and you look around the room, you should see what you see on the street. You should see that proportion of male to female. It's not all female, right? It's both. And you should see all different colors. You should, what you see when you walk out on the street in Manhattan is you see 100 different colors. You see a bunch of different genders. So I think we need to have a representation of the world on our sets. And that's
so for me, I've always worked with probably without really even being aware of it, 60 to 90% female crews. And I've always had a female assistant director. I just sort of woke up to that and went, huh. And I looked at the creative people around me, and it's always been females that I work with. And, I'm a, how do I say it? Like, I'm a heterosexual male. I'm just kind of putting that out there for whatever value that is, whether that's a limitation or a badge or whatever it is that the universe allotted me. But at the same time, that has nothing to do with my work as a director. And if anything, because I'm a feminist director that works with female crews and does female stories a lot, it's because I see that underdog status. And I just think storytelling, it's the most interesting when you're hit with unfair barriers. And you're hit with something that just shouldn't be there, but is there. And everybody knows it shouldn't be there, but it still stops you and you still have to turn away from it. And so that's kind of why women have always been more interesting as being that a booklet as opposed to a book in the storytelling. And for it to be a woman's film, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, which is a wonderful film, it doesn't have to be that. It can be like, Star Wars. I was thinking about, Princess Leia's story was really way more interesting than the farm boy guy that we followed around, Luke Skywalker. No offense to Luke, but he was kind of a dumb kid and we had to watch him sort of train, like, right? Like he's on Dagobah Island throwing Yoda around and stuff. And it's like, okay, we get it. You become a Jedi. But like, what was Princess Leia doing was like basically changing the Empire. Yeah. And now that we know that, like that part's revealed, it's kind of like, that kind of mirrors how women's history is that women's history has been largely hidden. And these new avenues are opening up. And and this is just my one little bit here on when I discovered Nellie Bly hidden in the history books, the editor of the New York Times, Brooke Kroger, and she worked with me for a while and gave me lots of advice and shared her book with me. And she's the world's expert on Nellie Bly. And I realized I had to do the life of this woman because one thing was, weirdly, she was the first and only female reporter that had a front page byline when other males didn't. And other men, it was just their story, but there was no byline. It was Joseph Pulitzer's magazine. But here it was Nellie Bly's byline because it was a novelty to the men. But to her, it was like she was the woman byline doing these really crazy things. And she invented investigative journalism where she worked with this guy from the Civil War who had been a spy for the North in the Civil War. And they used his spy techniques for her to go undercover at Blackwell's Island and pretend to be insane. Yeah. And so, I hit or miss for the film because it's really hard to do a movie where the primary torture is you don't get to do anything. You don't get any books. Books is considered it fevers the mind. So women that wanted to read too much were considered out of balance. They wanted to be too much like men because, men read. And women were content to sit and to sew or to look out the window or to, do 10,000 chores that have to be hidden where you have to pretend you're not doing them. So I don't mean to jump off and take over too much, but I'm just saying that men's involvement needs to be that they need to just break down the barriers and not do what they feel is comfortable from that one level. And they're going to suddenly realize there's this cornucopia of, excuse me to say this is a bit sexist, but women essentially chomping at the bit, waiting to do really super great work, creatively, like full, like a cornucopia of stuff coming. A giant ocean, a tsunami of women that are ready to put out their work, that have been held back by these invisible barriers where we need to get more women in film, and everybody like mouthpieces it. But it's a different thing to actually get out there and tell stories that involve, you know, main women characters. And so I do strong men characters too. It's not like this is all the men are now in dresses and they have to be helped up the rock, you know, because that's not really true either. Men are just still clunky beasts on the one side, and women get the nice bathrooms on the other side.
I also think there's something to be said about hiring women of different shapes and sizes. Because I think something that's a big problem is this, right? Those women are beautiful, right? But women at every shape and size are beautiful. I just remember being 14 years old and going through puberty, and all of a sudden crying because I had a shape and I didn't think I was beautiful anymore because I was no longer a stick figure. And I know so many other girls that went through that, and I'm just thinking of all like these teenage girls. This is what we see. All we see is emaciated women, which, I mean, some of them aren't, right? But most of them are. And we just need to see more. We don't take away their work and their talent and and their beauty, but we need to see women of all different shapes and sizes and colors, so that especially girls growing up don't have this thing in their head of, I'm not beautiful because I don't look like that one thing.
I couldn't agree with you more, because even now, and I say even now, but like things are fixed or whatever, because they're not, but even now you have larger female characters, and it's not like their weight or shape or size is totally irrelevant. Like, it's always mentioned, you know, in the script or in lines, or there's always a bit to do with this woman female character is large, we have to comment on it for some reason. Like, there's a need to comment on it. It's like, no, like, it's just another woman. Like, you know, her whole identity isn't her size, no matter what that size is. I couldn't agree with you more. It's a really good point.
There was an actor that I worked with on my last film where I met Natasha, and Natasha came in because an actress had fallen out. And we both have a mutual friend who's very big in New York theater named Dave Morrissey Jr., who's a very good guy. And he introduced me to Natasha, and I didn't know anything about her other than he just vouched for her that she's a really good actress, which turned out to be, we formed a kinship and understanding of her training and us not having any room for any BS anymore, and et cetera, et cetera. But in any case, I had one of the characters was written into the script as a sort of a mini-me, tired knockoff, with all the comedy being based on that he was short. And whereas sometimes it is funny that a person is shorter, that's the way life is, but you have to kind of like, you know, where are you going across that line a little bit that's not laughing with the person. So one of the things that we did is like, he's the sidekick, or he's the enforcer of a mobster who's a giant person in the story. And they just preset this up for me when I came onto the shoot. And okay, so I looked at it and I said, you know, there's no way that people just aren't going to they're not going to smile when they see them both coming out in bathrobes. And the one guy's, you know, he's 3 feet tall and the other person is 6'4". And I go, so that's just a natural thing, but I don't need to draw lines, that there's lines in it. And so one day we were sitting around on the set, and I had a lot of people on the set that were, let's say, not exposed to people of different ethnicities or from different, you know, persuasions of any form. And here's this person who's, you know, a bona fide little person. And they were all talking about, well, they got into this, what I would almost just say like cringeworthy conversation of, you know, so what's better to say, midget or dwarf? And I'm over in the corner, you know, trying to shrink away. And Colin, who is the actor, they were talking to it, and they were like, well, let's ask Colin. And they turned to him and said, you know, what would you rather be called, a little person, a midget, or a dwarf? And it was just like, it was so great. He just said, how about Colin? How about you call me Colin? And it was the realization of like how I could make this work, and I could pull this. And you know what it did is that we created it was just the right timber for him being this guy who actually was this enforcer guy. And I even built in a part of the scene where they talked about how how this relationship came to be, how they helped each other. And I did a lot of little changes, within the script for that. But I didn't mean to go off on there on that. But I was kind of using it as an example that it's about. Look, I was the opening film, and I felt kind of embarrassed about this because it was a film for women in diversity, thrown by Gina Davis, and 2 million people showed up, and they had everybody's support from all the major studios. And mine was the debut film opening the film festival with 10 Days in a Madhouse, directed by a man. And kind of weird in that, and the very first thing is a white guy with blonde hair and blue eyes comes out and directs the very first feminist film at this feminist film festival. So there was a part of me that was like the weird reverse thing of I was super apologetic for being a guy, kind of like that. There was that energy of I'm sorry, I know I'm a man, I know, but not in a bad way. It was just sort of to get people to realize that it shouldn't matter. In the way that if there's not a hypocrisy there, it really shouldn't matter either way on the gender swing. And having a female cinematographer versus a male cinematographer, I have my own basic personal prejudice. As I say, oftentimes a woman that this is her second film that year as opposed to her fifth film that year, and she knows that she's being watched. I don't bring that to it, but there's an energy that's brought to that may not always be there when everything is more equaled out, but maybe that's just the way it needs to grow. But I love working with female crews. I think my energy is always it's relaxed. There isn't I don't mean to be stereotype. I'm going to get probably slammed for that, but like a testosterone thing going on of competition all the time. It's more of a synergy of working together. It's a tribe. I find my films with working with mostly women crews. People have told me, like Kalela Brock, who was married to Steven Seagal. She was in, what was that movie? Weird Science many years ago, and she was the phrase supermodel was coined for her, and she said working on my films was like being in a person's living room, like everybody's just sort of hanging out at a party. And it's because although they all have their position, everybody has to sort of hold your spot where you are. You can't function. There needs to be a certain militaristic aspect to filmmaking. But the person taking out the garbage has ideas too. They weren't born a garbage person. And I'm not saying that there's a garbage person position. I'm talking about like a PA, and everybody's done, break out another 6-pack of PAs. And I've been one of those many times. And so it's just, to me, it's like, I've just always found that if you want a tighter ship and you want greater synergy, I would say to the men out there, look to female crews, especially in a time of this crisis and pandemic. There's a culture, and I'm talking really cultural difference, because if you strip away your stuff and my stuff, and we were reversed at birth, like Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, we would be two completely different people, because that's just how you're raised. You'd be given all these impressions. There'd be some chemical stuff, but those differences aren't enough to account for, whether, and a person's basic intelligence of whatever you might want to say. But to me, this is like such a no-brainer. I almost feel like, excuse me, I can't say this, it's not fair. It's like we just want to move forward. I want to move forward with making films with women and giving women opportunity, but not in the exclusion of men, or else it just gets weird the other way. And then it's all this sort of there's an excuse me, a critic. Her name is Lindsay Ellis, and she's an historical critic. So she does films that have come and gone already, and she talks about how Disney has this sort of fake empowerment of women. And she calls it the woke woman kind of thing. Yeah, and it's like how it's not really empowerment. It's still selling you on the princess thing, making sure that that's still strong and locked in. But that it's with a new form of you can be a princess and be empowered at the same time, and trying to sort of hold on to their brand.
Yeah.
And so there's all the stuff that goes on with it. But when we really get right down to it, there's just a lot more stories to be told. And I think that what Natasha, is that a weird... What did you do up there? Oh, that's very funny. That's very funny.
Hot, but
Natasha talked about how she didn't want to play sort of like in a Spider-Man movie, wouldn't want to play the girlfriend on the arm of Spider-Man as much as she'd want to play the female superhero.
Yeah.
And I think that's the right perspective. But the reason I sidetracked myself, when Gina Davis held this thing, she had a few major female star actress friends who came on to this little seminar that we did, and they brought in scripts that were they brought in scripts that were written for males, like The Odd Couple, and these scripts that were Planes, Trains, and Automobiles that was for John Candy and for I'm sorry, Steve Martin.
Yeah.
And they did scenes from them identically without changing anything about the script at all, not even changing the names or anything, and just did the scenes with them as funny comedians, showing they could be as funny as John Candy and Steve Martin doing these same scenes, and showing that there didn't need to be anything different.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah, so I just one last thing is, that for me, from my perspective, and working with Natasha, the reason why her and I are going to do a lot of film together and a lot of work together, and we spend some good time talking about future plans and all of that, is that she's the real thing. She's done a tremendous amount of actor training and has great insight. It isn't just that, because you either have it or you don't. It's something that's watchable or not. And her voiceover that she did for playing Perdix in Chrome brought life to that, where in private she sort of has this queenly thing where she has this sort of private thing going on, but out here she's all deferring to the bad guys as this little tiny robot floating around like, oh, please, telling stupid jokes, and which was really fun to do. But then I got to see 6 or 8 sides of her where she didn't judge the character. And when she first came on, and at first when she was doing the Please Forgive Me, the first moment I heard British accent, and I already knew Natasha was an American, I went oh, it's going to be, it's going to be Emma Thompson meets, Mary Poppins, but it wasn't. It was that just was irrelevant. It was just a throwaway thing that she did that she knew how to work because she lived in Brighton.
Yeah. Oh, in Boston.
No, I did. I lived in Bristol.
Oh, Bristol. I'm sorry.
I lived in Bristol for a year, and then I lived in London for 4.
Yeah.
I went to drama school in England.
Oh, great. Did you enjoy?
Anyway.
Did you enjoyed that that time over in England?
Yeah. And the training was exemplary. I particularly enjoyed my time in Bristol. I'll tell you what, I never went to Brighton.
Oh.
I wish I had gone to Brighton.
Yeah.
Moody. It was moody.
Yeah.
I liked it. It was moody. It had a kind of a melancholy. When I went there, the weather was gray, and it was and it was it had a wanderlust feeling to it. I can't explain it, but it's there was a sense of that there was more to life, kind of a feeling from the atmosphere. I can't explain it, but the fall does that to me, and there's certain times a year, like when the leaves turn.
Yeah.
It had that leaves turn kind of a feeling to me. But anyway, sorry. That was my 2 cents on it.
No, that was really interesting as well, because kind of like both of you said, it's the joy of collaborating on something that's creative is comes from lots of places, but obviously having a lot of diverse voices and opinions and experiences to bring into the mix, and no one group of people should kind of lead that in isolation of all of the other groups.
Right.
That's super important. I think as well, audiences are becoming a lot more kind of savvy and a bit more demanding for diversity in the kind of content and film and stuff that they watch as well. Have you found that kind of the demand from people who are watching has changed?
I think so. I definitely think so. I think the demand has been for diversity, right? But only now I feel like as a society do we have more of a voice because of things like social media, because of things like the internet, right? We're able to have our voices heard, or people read what we say in a way that they couldn't before. So I don't know if it's that it's changed or that we have a platform now to be vocal. But now our voices, I feel like, are finally being heard.
So from my perspective, just connections to the studios and seeing what's going on inside that world, they have a structure they've maintained since 1903, ever since that they've come to be, and one cannibalized another, and the Lasky Players was eaten up by Paramount Pictures that became this company, that's that company, and they sort of have a structure where, in my sort of laughing opinion, has always been that they have to be seen competing, and they have to be seen doing these things. And mostly it's fake, and a few people are put out in the front, and almost given the kind of perspective of, let's say, a woman director being put out there. oftentimes with a very risky venture with not enough advertising behind her, being set up to fail so that when she fails, it's being shown like, look, see, women can't do this. And, there was that. But I think our world just went through a place where we've had a brain pop, where it's been kind of like something has come to a head, so to speak, and it's changed, where there's all this secret hidden stuff that we kind of all knew was there that we didn't know was secret and hidden. Kind of like the way that, things are buried in our language. Like me as an Irish person, I might not like you to say, oh, I've got my ire up. And I go, oh, what? We have a temper? You're saying we can't hold our temper? That's kind of funny. No, I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. I kind of lost my point. I did, really. I just kind of completely went, actors went up on stage. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay. There was a tweet a while ago linked to what you were saying about kind of putting those female directors up and going, what do you guys think of this female director? But there was a tweet saying
oh yes, I'm sorry.
The Candyman film that was coming out, I think it's due to come out, or it might have recently been out, by Nia DaCosta, a female director, and they have been advertising it and tweeting about it as if it's like a Jordan Peele film. So kind of using the male name to promote the film and not really talking too much about the actual, I think he's a producer on it, but not really talking too much about the female director. And I thought that was quite interesting, and I was I shocked? I don't know whether I was shocked, but I thought it was quite interesting that happened.
I feel like that's because, right, they want people know Jordan Peele, people like Jordan Peele's work, so they want to come see it if it's hit. But it's such a novelty, unfortunately, to have a female director, so they should be advertising that, because as a female, I'd be more interested to see a female work of a female director than I would be to see Jordan Peele. No offense to Jordan Peele, he's great, but
But also Hollywood has lately, just before the pandemic hit, there was the beginnings of largely out of the Me Too movement, which was both, good and bad, had both sides, had a side that really worked for it. And then, and hopefully as it progresses and evolves, people will evolve their thinking and not destroy the movement because of maybe some sort of wrong-headed thinking that got started in the beginning with some of it. And it becomes something that becomes a tool of strength where women's voices can be heard. And so, but out of that, and I think Harvey Weinstein coming down at the same time, I just want to share with you, I did a film in 1984 called Sunrise on Alphabet City. And it was about these two guys that happened to be suspiciously like Harvey Weinstein and Bob Weinstein, called Golan and Globus. I made them. That was my characters' names. And how they take this man's film, who he did a historical drama about the Black Death that was very serious and very, like Emma Thompson would have starred in it. And they recut it and added new scenes and retitled it and put it out as Medieval Blood Feast of the Maidens. And it made a fortune because they cut in all of these like sexual scenes and did all of this stuff to it. And so the main character in the film goes to this Globus's office in the middle of the night to steal his film negatives back. And he has a gun that he got from his friend and all this whole build-up thing. And turns out the guy is behind his front desk. He's behind his desk in his office, and he gets up and he's pulling his pants up. And I did a scene that, like, 2 minutes into the scene, a woman gets up really super finely dressed and puts on an earring and walks out. And I was making fun of the fact that everybody knew that Harvey Weinstein was like this throughout all of Hollywood. So that was, like, to me, the biggest shock of revelation. Like, everybody's like going, oh, what? Yeah. Elephants have 4 big giant legs. And it was like, but the sad part for me out of all of this is a good thing too, and it's happening, is that the Me Too movement didn't just stop there. That if it was just Harvey Weinstein and he goes away for 4,000 years, that only solves one of thousands of executives that are doing this. And when you guys were talking about weight, Natasha, I worked with this actress who was 125 pounds, and she was 5'9", and was an up-and-coming actress and had a really great career ahead of her. And I introduced her to a producer who had, let's say, you had to have a wheelbarrow to hold onto his stomach in front of him. you know, and I'm just saying, I mean, I'm not being, you know, crude about weight itself, but like as a person who's going to be sensitive to somebody else's weight, this man was not, let's say, was obese. And I introduced him to my actress, and he loved her, and her credentials were really great. And as she was walking away, I said, "Isn't she amazing?" And he said, "Yeah, except for that big fat ass." And I was just
sorry,
like,
what man does not love a big fat ass?
which by the way, right? And you'd figure that, but you know, so this guy was unique in and of himself. But the point being is that she was seen as grotesquely overweight at 125 pounds and at 5'9".
That's crazy.
And that's the Hollywood thing, is that they don't talk about it. But so for me, it's, you know, that's totally irrelevant. There's been all throughout history, it all comes down to this. I advise actresses to, when they talk to you about weight, tell them, admonish them, and say, the audience isn't going to weigh me. It's how I'm going to appear on film. Mm-hmm. And it's extra changes they can make. If something's making them feel that that person is, let's say, my immediate reaction would say, instead of saying that they're overweight, say that we're talking about a sense of grace or something that you want to see in the character that you're not seeing with me, and change it to being about the actress. And I would go back to, like, the super stereotype would be Bette Midler, who is built like two refrigerators put together, strapped together. And she's this amazing person and has this, that's sexist, isn't it? But like, I can say it about a guy too, like a big football player guy, right? Two big refrigerators is what I'm thinking about, a big person. But just like everything about her was like, you know, charismatic, oozing off the film. Like she knew herself. She had confidence in herself, and it's this glowing spirit. And so I'm going to just segue here for a second. My movie Chrome is about, I wanted to show underdogs. I was scared about doing a naked girl in the film and having it be this prurient thing of everybody's like getting a masturbatory thing out of it, as opposed to it being, which is what I wanted, which was that she's extremely vulnerable. And I hung on to it for almost a decade, not knowing how to put this out and not get it wrong and have it be this wrong thing. So now what it is when she goes out and gets a hole blown in her, I feel that the audience, we're getting this huge, giant positive response of women specifically saying, no, they feel that, and her getting a hole blown in her. And then Natasha kind of getting together with her and as Perdix and going, they're not going to treat you well at all here. And kind of an almost, excuse my language, but an F you in their face of like, oh, they weren't even going to give you a name. Here's some super armor. And, you know, now like, you know, and it's the whole thing that Chrome loses her human injury inhibitor for some reason.
Yeah.
And can't stop. And I had fun when we put it all together, and Natasha and us all creating all the bits for the getting the vocals right to, you know, create the story. And I half edited as she would do vocals and I would do editorial changes. And I did this with all the voiceover actors for the robots. Now she actually has her face appear in episode 2.
Oh, cool.
Because she's a designer robot. She's a repair bot. So she changes her form and her figure all the time and turns into different little creatures. But I, you know, so Chrome is it might be relevant to the moment, and even kind of scared me that Chrome puts her foot on the neck of the cop.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, oh God, is that relevant to the moment? Like, well, yeah, when I wrote it in 1995, I was seeing as a frustration that people felt with the police even back then. So it isn't, again, it's not an overnight thing. We're all just suddenly going, what? Black people are mistreated by police?
Yeah.
I talked to a Black friend recently who said, and as Black as being relevant, in that I said, when I grew up, we were taught that the local policeman was named Officer Friendly. And he laughed for like 2 minutes. He goes, Officer Friendly, that's really funny. Because not in his neighborhood, not where he grew up, and more police were the people who are supposed to protect you were adversarial even when he was young.
Yeah, yeah.
So not to go off on all of that, but it's going to take care of itself. You know what I think it is? Will come out in the wash. I think that people, the weight of, look, living in New York, Natasha, you could attest to this. Their traffic lights mean nothing. In other words, if the cars are going, the traffic lights will just, like, nobody cares. They just pour right on through like blood vessels in a vein.
When you're driving, it's very annoying.
Right? And there's no lanes.
Really
it's like Italy in that there's no lanes. You just kind of flow wherever there's room, and people honking at you left and right, and bicyclists coming up alongside and all this stuff going on. And I've always contended that if there's more people at the intersection, then in other words, if the people at the intersection all as a whole weigh more than the Mack truck trying to get through, they get the right of way and they just take over. And it doesn't matter if there's lights or not. They just they flood the intersection. And if the Mack truck weighs more than the amount of people trying to get through, then they give the courtesy. So it's very much a law of the jungle kind of energy. And I think that right now that there's always these incremental things that the people on top give the people down below to make sure that the other rest of almost everybody gives them almost all the land while we look at it. And so to be able to keep that happening, they got to do a lot of mental conniptions and a lot of mental tricks. But there's times where, and Abraham Lincoln never said this, but whoever did, you can't fool all of the people all of the time.
Yeah.
And eventually everybody wakes up at a certain point all together. They all have the same bad dream and they wake up and they go, we're going for it.
Yeah.
And so here's what's going to happen with Black Lives Matter will turn into also Native American Lives Matter, but not as a all lives matter, which is a pejorative destruction of Black Lives Matter. It's just get rid of it. But then women's rights matter. And to me, it's like, I'm in shock that, 2001 Space Odyssey, dun, 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 we're watching this old movie, right? And it's just beautiful special effects and whatever. And they're just not showing sexism on it, but maybe they are. Maybe because the woman had a short skirt on and she was like doing this whole survey thing and showing her bare legs. And you don't see the guys walking around showing their bare legs. So, but anyway, that's the whole distraction.
It's actually, like thinking about it, it's the first episode of Chrome is kind of like touching on all of these hyper relevant points that are kind of happening in our world right now. And I read somewhere that you've been working on Chrome for a long time, and like you mentioned, you've been working on it for a long time.
19 years.
Yeah. Were there challenges with getting it made, or were you kind of, it just required that kind of time to develop such a story like that?
So I'll be as quick as I can. And Natasha, you smack me and say banana. Our code to Natasha, if I talk too much, is to say banana. So in a nutshell, it was 2001, and we were going to shoot on September 13th, War of the Worlds. We were going to do an updated version.
Kidding. Sorry, that was a joke.
Look how you got me trained. There. I yield the floor to Natasha.
No, that was a joke.
You're just testing it. You're just testing the emergency system, like the red fire alarm. So it was 2001, and we had Michael Caine and Charlize Theron and Matthew McConaughey. And we were going to start shooting in 2 days, and Osama bin Laden blew up the World Trade Center, and we lost our $42 million budget, and I had $8 million left, and I had the script to Chrome, which was a script that I thought would never get made because I was misdiagnosed. This is going to sound just like something out of a dark soap opera from the 1950s, with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which it turned out not to be.
Oh, wow. God.
And I thought I was dying, so I just wrote this script for Chrome.
Yeah.
Of like wanting to tell the story of a movie that I'd like to see get made that would just be an endless budget. So I didn't care about the budget at all.
Yeah.
So then when we actually got $8 million left from War of the Worlds, we went in and we made a deal with this guy who owned a brewery that was a city block long, built in the 1800s all the way up until the 1980s. Over a city block with technology fusing from this old, talk about steampunk.
Oh,
of automatic built-in steampunk, because everything was brass retrofitted on top of things that were bricks and all this kind of really amazing set pieces. And so the guy who owned it was this eccentric, retired, super rich engineer, a millionaire, who just made this his home. And he lived in this place with no electricity except for in one spot. So when we filmed, we had to wear these headlamps and go and find our spots, and then he would string power to the spots where we were shooting. And it was super dangerous in that there was holes in the ground where you could fall 5 stories. So you had to really watch where you were going. And at the same time, we took over a boys' middle school that had been closed, and the gymnasium became our main soundstage, where we built 70 sets.
Oh, cool!
And all of the classrooms became hair and makeup, the actor's green room, another actor's green room, and then I took over the principal's office as the director. It was kind of funny. I had the principal's office with the, the gate thing that opens up that take, to go get punished, kind of a thing. And so this is the weird, cool thing, is that everybody was depressed. It's not cool that everybody was depressed, but everybody was depressed. Nobody wanted to make any movies. Everybody was upset. Mm-hmm. Nobody was going forward, and I made a deal with the unions at the time that we did sort of everybody called me a socialist, in that I just paid every single person on the entire crew and the cast the exact same wages. So if you were the PA at this end or you were the top star at this end, you guys got the same exact amount of money for the entire shoot.
Wow.
And that took the pressure off of one hairstylist being upset that that hairstylist was getting $50 more a week than her, and she knew she was just as worthy.
Mm.
And suddenly this kind of like a once in a lifetime kind of like, Mary Shelley and her whole group hanging out, all of these people came together and formed this world where they became highly protective of Chrome, the world. And all of these artists, both the males and the females, we had like 400 people involved, all started putting in their 2 cents and strengthening this part and fighting for these rights of the storytelling that I had to really work hard to maintain, that I was still holding on to my backbone and what was going on within my story and what I wanted to do about bullies, which is the core for Chrome for me, is that anybody who's ever been bullied or ever been put down or ever been, had their dreams smashed deliberately by somebody who's getting off on that deserves to be a villain in my movie Chrome and get crushed, so to speak. And it's a fun film from that perspective of, and also there's, I have an underlying subversive message. I will tell you that I'm a fan of Twilight Zone, if that should tell you anything about that. There's an ending to Chrome that's a complete surprise.
Yeah.
And Natasha plays a Merlin character, which she knows all about way more than me, even in how she sort of put her character together. But yeah, so
yeah. And on that topic, Natasha, how did you kind of approach the character of Perdix? What kind of did you do?
Well, so first I read the script a couple times, right? And with Perdix, first I went through her backstory, where I thought, how old is she? Where does she come from? What's the life she had? And I know that she's about to be part of this robot revolution, right? So I went through her backstory and kind of saw, what does that make about her? And I approached Perdix as I would approach a human character, right? So even though she is a robot, she's sentient. She has the consciousness of any human, probably even far more. And in this world of Chrome, it's the humans that no longer have humanity and the robots that do. So I found Perdix probably has a lot of empathy, because we need the contrast to the human worlds who completely lack all empathy. So I made her much more empathetic than most humans. But I went about her the way I would go about any sort of human character, and just like developed her the way I would develop a human, except I added a little vocal fry to her voice because she is a robot.
Yeah.
So but her character development was actually the same as I would develop kind of any person. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and one thing I think was interesting was we spent a lot of time once Natasha. So the idea, was that the robots show more humanity than the humans do in the story, and the humans have lost their humanity for their they found a contempt for each other that they inflict out upon each other all the time, which is sort of the language of bullies. And then the robots, they become likable even though you may not recognize them in form. Natasha's character sort of being Thomas the Tank, that you see their humanity through how they behave, through how they think about things and how they think about people. And so we get to see that underbelly, like I talked about with Natasha saying they weren't even going to give you a name. And that was like a really important thing to me, of like sort of how do we all fit in and how do they perceive us in the regular world as our actual value. And and all the statistics and all the numbers you can do about coronavirus you want, and then when it's your aunt or your sister or your mother, it's an entirely different story period at the end.
Right.
And so so Natasha, a lot of stuff that we did, to me, that was really exciting was figuring out what she was going to say on the surface, because she's tricking them in the very opening. Am I spoiler alerting too much?
Yeah.
But so it's subtext. It's what to bury into subtext and to say it in a different way that says the exact same thing but with a different meaning.
Right.
Do you have an appointment? Why, yes, that's what I'm here for.
I'll tell you what. So much of who Perdix is written on the page. Tim did a really good job of just putting in the script like everything that I needed to know. So for me, a lot of it was about going through kind of everything Perdix says and does, and then going, okay, well, what does this say about her as a character. What does this mean? Where does this come from? Why does she respond in these ways? So that was a lot of my work, but it was, I mean, Tim gave me everything I needed on the page. And then together, a lot of that was, I'm really big about not giving spoilers.
So, you know,
so this is where I'm cutting off.
No, but and the hard part is that because there's Chrome is such a character of action, but then already you can kind of see in episode number 1 that just hinting at that can be harnessed perhaps. And that's really basically, I don't want to give not much more away than that, because each episode is 10 times the previous one as far as plot development goes.
Right.
And then not to be careful, you know, the one thing I had coming into this is a 20-year project. It becomes the opus where he has to have the thing because he always remembered the red car. And it's like, no, you know, and I'm telling it fresh from the moment. And that's why we, you know, are, instead of releasing all at one time, that we've taken this incredibly brand new generation of creative team, you know, led by Natasha and Dave Morrissey and Matt Silver and a few other actors that are come in to voice the characters, and making it relevant to the moment without trying to, you know, capitalize on, the Me Too movement is there, or, look, Black Lives Matter, let's get a Black Lives Matter thing in. I want it to be true to what it is and have it be relevant because it's already telling that story. But, you know, we don't live in a bubble. You can't make films and oh my God, the fan films thing, by the way, I mean, I don't mean to just jump on that. They're astounding, some of the level of work they put onto those things.
Yeah, it's amazing. Some of the films that I've seen have been, absolutely incredible in terms of all of the component parts have been like kind of really breathtaking. And that was one of my questions actually, because obviously with the kind of sci-fi and world building, like huge world potential building of Chrome, there's a potential for, you know, a fandom to be kind of born from that, for people to really, like with Star Wars and Indiana Jones and things,
right,
to identify with and latch on to that kind of story, and for a fandom to be born out of that. Is that something that you've considered the possibility of happening? Is that happening already? Are you excited by that possibility?
I think that I'm sort of being told right now, based on the success that we've had with Chrome and the you know, you just know, you know, like if like you've produced a movie that you worked really hard on and people come up and go, I really liked your film. It was really up there on the screen. You know, it was, boy, it really occupied the full screen up there. And there's a certain thing like where you're not hearing the praise. And you can kind of tell that, you know, like when I did War of the Worlds and even for 10 Days in a Madhouse, I mean, they're hard films. They're dealing with extremely hard subjects. So it's, I get strong glimpses, number one, in the numbers. You know, NBC Universal picked up 10 Days in a Madhouse and distributed it to the 4 corners of the earth. But for Chrome, immediately seeing the fallback, or the fallout of extremely super positive, like almost to the point where you're like, wait a minute, you know, like it's a little too quiet out there. You know, like you start to feel suspicious of it. But then, you know, of course, occasionally in comes the 1-star rating guy, rubbish. And you go, oh, okay, everything's normal. You know, there actually are, there's not some like glitch where they've like held back all the negative comments today. They just turn on the valve and you know, it's like 10,000 times more. But no, and you know what it is, because I want it to be something that was just fun. We're in times where, in spite of the fact that it's really dark stories and dark storytelling and all of this, something that just wakes us up and does something more than just, you know, and because what if coronavirus went on 10 years? I mean, God forbid. You know, we're all sitting here in our living rooms, and you know, it's the same things, and it's the same, you know, or wherever our, you know, locations are, and it's like, but I think honestly, this is the greatest opportunity right now for women on earth ever, and it's the greatest opportunity for independence. And let me tell you why, because the front end structure of Hollywood was set up for movie theaters, period, at the end. And everything else was secondary. All the digital downloads and the tie-ins and all the streaming stuff and all of that was basically coattails piggybacked on what happened at the box office in theaters, where you had butts and seats.
Yeah. And
no more butts and seats means it wasn't just that all those front-end executives just suddenly turned and went, oh, we'll just turn to digital. There was already a digital department that had all of those jobs that they occupied. They couldn't just turn and go, you, president of so-and-so, you're out because I was out. and downline. So there was a clash at first. And during that clash, they also had to figure out, well, what are we going to do? I mean, Wonder Woman just keeps pushing back. And they just pushed back again to November again. So that's a full year, from when they first started, partly first from just storytelling things and getting things right. And they're hard movies to make, and always give them grace for that. But so right now, Hollywood's in this place where it's rebuilding itself. And all of the smart, I can see it because I can see the small distributors around me, the really smart ones, are doing what they're actually calling it. They're using these terms. They're actually mouthpiecing this. They're saying it's a land grab right now. It's like the 1800s and the government just said free land to anybody who wants it, because the internet is like all becoming streaming. And suddenly everything that is streaming, unless you're Quibi and Jeffrey Katzenberg, the one thing on the internet that's not working. But everybody else is like getting gigantic numbers, and somehow he's just invertedly screwed that up so badly that history will tell why he blew this multi-billion-dollar platform and only got like 1 million listeners. But so I think that women right now should go for their projects, go for their financing, start talking to financing to people, because I'll also tell you that when we hit these times where people are depressed. And to come to someone and go, I've got this really great story and this idea and this thing, it wakes people out of their, do we want 30 years of sitting in boxes or 10 years of sitting in boxes, or going out and unsocial distancing and killing everybody, and then go, oh, that didn't work. And then we pull back. And then we do it again. Then we pull back. Because truthfully, historically, that's what humans do.
Yeah.
And the Black Plague, the first wave wasn't the big wave. The first wave was when everybody went, and they all social distanced. And then within a very tiny short period of time, they went, okay, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Then you hear about the Black Plague, where they now think it's possible that it killed every other person in Europe.
God.
So, we're not doing doom and gloom. But anyway.
Yeah. So I realize I've taken up a bunch of your time, longer than I intended to.
It's fun.
Thank you very much. So I guess, what does the future hold for Chrome? Once the first series is out, all of the films are out, is there spin-off potential, new characters, bigger world?
It ends in a place that opens it for a sequel. There's also, people have been sort of calling for a spin-off of the character Colonel Zet, which I have to be very careful about, because, the anti-hero thing of the Joker, kind of an energy. I have to be aware of that, from a fan perspective. But I kind of want to feel it out more, because there really is structure that flows through, and there's a great sociological structure to Chrome. It's not just people shooting each other and flying around and doing things. She has a purpose, and these things come together. And I'm like, I ruined it actually in a podcast the other day. I couldn't believe I did this, but I outed Bruce Willis for The Sixth Sense.
Oh my God. Tim, this is the third podcast you've added Bruce Willis in.
No, but I didn't say what the special hidden thing was in The Sixth Sense. Just that Bruce Willis has something to do with a thing that happens in The Sixth Sense. No, am I doing it again? I'm not doing it again.
Sorry, I've never seen Sixth Sense.
Oh.
Well, you know this. No, Tim, before any of the podcast, Tim told me over the phone.
No.
And then
I was using it as an example for what not to do. So I'm not saying anything.
He's king spoiler.
Bruce Willis has nothing to do with the surprise ending of The Sixth Sense. Oh God, I can't fix that one. Okay, sorry.
No more Sixth Sense. You're never allowed to talk about Bruce Willis again, Tim.
Yeah, Bruce Willis off the table.
It was an iconic example of something, but you know what it is? It's foreshadowing in it. It was the red handles and the red balloons and stuff like that. And I love foreshadowing. I'm just a giant fan of foreshadowing and giving you stuff that kind of pieces together. And in spite of who Charles Dickens was as a human being, Dickens was very good at that. At being able to weave these intricate things where later on it turns out that meant this.
Right.
And Chrome has that. But anyway.
Amazing. So we can look forward to more Chrome
every 3 months
in the future. Yeah. And apart from Chrome, are you guys working on anything else? Have you got anything else in the pipeline, or is it all kind of quite shut down at the moment?
In the fall, we're shooting a movie that Natasha's starring in called God's Country, about a super uber wealthy person who never has visited the kitchen in her own house is suddenly thrust into the wilderness and has everybody taken away from her and her cousin who have no survival skills whatsoever and have to survive in the wilderness.
That sounds great.
And they hate each other. So it's sort of angry Thelma and Louise in the 1930s. And no, it's good though. And Natasha's the lead.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this one.
Yeah.
Super, super excited.
So you're shooting in the fall. So
yes.
Yeah.
And we're going to meet up and we'll quarantine and we'll be tested. Then we'll wait a few days and then be tested again a second time. Then the group has to become a pod where we can't interact with other outside people. We have to have already gotten all of our materials and everything together. And if we do interact, there has to be this arduous process that we have to go through where we have to get tested again. We have to quarantine again. We have to space. Right. Because it's, like I said, it's okay until it becomes you getting it. And either of us, and any of us here, Natasha, for you, it took you months to get over it.
Mine was only 3 weeks.
Oh, 3 weeks.
Mine was 3 weeks. Mine wasn't, but I know how long it took you.
Yeah, it was 8 weeks. Yeah. But you don't know until it hits you because it has to do with individual things within your immune system that you find out. And it doesn't just hit your lungs. It hits your lungs, your liver, your muscles, your gastronomical, everything about it. I didn't mean to go off on coronavirus too much about this, but look, it's going to be part of our lives. We don't get to go back to the way the world was before. That's going to be the hardest part for people to wake up for their favorite things that they love to do. At least how many times a week do you wake up and go, oh, when the coronavirus thing is over, and you go, no, it'll never be that again.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the movie theaters wrapped in a plastic bag with a plastic mask on my face, socially distanced from people with plastic seat covers. It's going to be like going to watch a movie at a laundromat. I don't know if that's is that now the same positive, happy thing that we used to do?
Yeah, I'm desperate to go to the cinema because
I know.
We've got the UK's, one of the world's oldest cinemas is right next door to me. It's called the Duke of York. And,
cool.
It's a beautiful, beautiful theatre. And they're opening again on the 10th of July, which I feel like is very soon. And I'm nervous about it, but it's one of my self-care activities, just taking myself off to the cinema and sitting in a dark room and disappearing off into another world for a while. But yeah.
I think if you socially distance, if you just personally socially distance and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Look, the numbers are this. If you do more to socially distance and protect yourself, you're more likely to not get coronavirus and to survive.
Yeah.
The less you do to socially distance yourself, I mean, this is not rocket science.
Yeah.
You're going to tend to get coronavirus. So going to the theater, I feel the same way. Like, we're not designed to forever sit in these little tiny self-imposed caves, and it's too much. But at a certain point, we have to make a decision about what and how and where and when. So, maybe there's a lot of technology going to just develop out of demand from the people, not coming from our governments who make giant promises and then vote huge amounts of money to themselves and go, what, where, what? For the, I don't mean to be cynical about it, but that's going to happen. And just like we're doing, like our production for God's Country, where Natasha and I and a small group of people are going to meet up out in the Pacific Northwest in little motel rooms in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and then quarantine and get tested and then go off and shoot this movie. Is like, we had to come up with a structure.
Right.
Because IATSE just hadn't gotten there yet. And now incorporate anything, excuse me, frog in my throat, coronavirus. I'm sorry, that's bad taste. I had it. I can joke about it. No, it's not funny. It's not funny. I apologize. I'm a bad boy. I'm sorry. No, but I worried a lot about dying from coronavirus, so you got to make fun of it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, he did.
So yeah, so I got my coronavirus. I'm afraid to die. I don't want to die from coronavirus batch. Anyway, no, but this is really super great talking with you.
Yeah, you too.
You're amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
I read all your credentials, and I think that what you're doing is just super fantastic work for women in film. And I think just keep breaking it down to that. Look, how do we say it? Pound for pound, women should be paid the same as men, period, the end, and should have equal opportunity as men, the end, period, the end. Like, what's the big stupid thing about this?
Yeah, it shouldn't be rocket science. Sure.
And the fact but what it is about the hidden power corridors where they don't tell you that there's closed doors and there's glass ceilings. And so it's pushing up against those unfair spots and pushing up against where it's unfair, and not saying no and backing down where people always have, and they tell you, look, your career, this, that, whatever, don't tell people. And don't say those things, and just say no. I'm going to push through at this point. And there's some pioneer people become sacrifices, if you understand what I'm saying. Like they put themselves out there to sort of become the person who throws themselves on their sword first. I grew up with off and on connecting with Rose McGowan. And so I knew her when she was 16 years old, and I worked with her sister. She actually played Chrome in my first test footage of Chrome many, many years ago to see if Chrome was going to work. And a weird, interesting side story, that when my mother passed away at 91, the room next to where my mother was dying, like there was my family's name on the door, and the door next to me was McGowan, and her father was dying, and he died within 2 hours of my mother in the same hospital. Wow. Even though she's from Los Angeles and I was in Seattle at the time. And just how weird life can like give you these cross intersections. But so she's had a very rocky road in trying to figure things out for herself, but she's a very strong person, and the Time's Up movement, I think, is what she's mostly focused on. But they've got some stuff to work out there. All women should be heard. I think that they've like got caught with their pants down by having the rightist people say all women should be heard, not believed. And yes, there is a truth to that. Absolutely. That makes sense when you say it, but it shouldn't still throw out the baby with the bathwater and just destroy the whole movement because this one thing was wrong. All Christianity should be destroyed because of what they did during the Inquisitions.
Yeah.
You can't destroy Christians because of the Spanish Inquisitions. Maybe there's some good people out there trying to help some people and attack the thinking, or who's in charge and who's in control of what the current thinking is. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to go off, but
no, it's all right. Dealing in absolutes is just it's not. You can't just. Nothing's black and white, if you know what I mean.
Right. But you go for it anyway. Just go for it.
Yeah.
Just go for it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I'm just in kind of pre-production on my very, very first short film, so I'm kind
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, really exciting. So I'm kind of starting my journey a little bit. So this is all very encouraging and helpful and motivating for me as well to hear. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then just, keep it about the art, keep it about your storytelling, and you won't lose no matter what. All the stuff will fall into place. All your technical side will fit when you keep going from the standpoint of you're telling this story. And what do you want to say?
Great.
That's my 2 cents.
Great. But that's super helpful. Thank you.
Awesome.
So thank you both, Natasha and Tim, very much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to sharing our awesome conversation with everybody for the FANMADE podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. This has been great.
Yeah. All the best.
Thank you very much.
In the fall as well. I hope everything goes really, really well. And I'm looking forward to more Chrome, obviously.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay.
You guys, take care.
Right. Bye. Take care. Good luck with your film.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you. Huge thanks to Natasha Coppola Shalom and Timothy Hines for joining me and giving me their time, and for the exceptionally insightful, motivational, and powerful discussion in this episode. Go and watch the first episode of Chrome on Amazon Prime. The links are on my website, fanmadefilmpodcast.com. And also make sure you keep up to date with everything Chrome news by following the series on their Twitter account, which is @ChromeSeries. Thanks again to Natasha, Timothy, as well as producer and actor Susan Goforth for setting everything up. And now, sadly, I have to say goodbye for this season of the FANMADE Film Podcast. Like I mentioned at the top, this has been one of the best experiences and projects I've worked on, and I'm really proud to see it all completed. But, like any good franchise, we absolutely need a sequel. Season 2 of the FANMADE Film Podcast will be in production from September 2020, with a view to go live mid-October 2020. I've already booked in some recordings with filmmakers from the worlds of Harry Potter and the Spider-Verse, as well, of course, my beloved Galaxy Far, Far Away, and you'll be hearing from co-host Chris a lot more in Season 2, for good or for ill. As always, if you have or know of a fan film you love or have worked on, get in touch by emailing fanmadefilmpodcast@gmail.com. Or connect with me on Twitter, I'm @RealRachelFinch, or Instagram, which is @RachelPearsonFinch. And share the films with me. If you have any feedback as well about the podcast in general, I would really love to hear from you. Basically, get in touch. I love talking to other filmmaking film fans. Wherever you are in the big wide world, whatever the last 6 months has been for you, whatever you're going through or coming out of, the theme of this podcast and the wars of the stars that inspired it is hope. Have hope, be kind, save what you love instead of fighting what you hate, and, as always, may the force be with you.
This is the Fan Made Film Podcast.